right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. Appreciate you taking a few minutes with us. My name is John McNamara. I'm the Superintendent of Schools, and this is our third of 4 budget forums that we've been doing for the community. We started back a few weeks ago just to share where we were at that point in the budget process, give everyone an update a couple weeks ago. And this forum is as we're getting much closer to adopting our budget. Our timeline to adopt our budget is at our upcoming Board of Education meeting on April 7th. So we kind of go through these series of forums, share the process, share where we are, share the planning. This is a process that starts back in the fall, where we start to meet with the different directors and supervisors and principals, and our assistant superintendent for business starts to put together the budget. And then we are kind of back and forth on that throughout the winter and put together our expenditure side. So we get to a point where we're a little bit more comfortable there, and then take a look at the revenue side. We still have a couple of question marks at this point in the budget. I'll share that with you tonight. And really tonight is just more of an update and overview of some of the information that we've shared already at the previous budget forums. And I'm glad we have a few new faces tonight, so we'll kind of share with folks some of that information. And then kind of just prepare for adopting our budget on April 7th. This is, as I said, a lengthy process, but a good process in terms of really taking a look at all of our program, all the various areas of the budget to support. So I'm joined here tonight by our Assistant Superintendent for Business, Anthony Cedrone, our Assistant Superintendent for Instruction, Mark Ferris, and our Assistant Superintendent for PPS, Stephen Moran, as well as several of our board members are here this evening. Our board president, Anthony Greco, our board vice president, Laura Reich, trustees Adam Fisher, Kira McLaughlin, and Tara Cassidy are here as well. So thank you all for joining us tonight. I'll give some of the overview, and then I'll turn it over to Anthony, Mark, and Stephen for parts of tonight as well. So this is just kind of updated where we are and where we've been. Starting on March 7th, we started with our first forum a couple of weeks ago on the 21st. We did forum number 2. We focused on staffing and kind of gave an overview of some of the different program and staffing at that forum. And then tonight, more of just a general update and overview. Our final forum will be on this Wednesday at 10 a.m. at the public library. So as we kind of start every budget process, this slide for us really represents an overview of all the things that are fantastic about our district and some of the great programs that we have, and our goal to really maintain those programs and from the elementary level right up through our secondary level. And these were the goals that we set out to achieve. Unfortunately, last year, our first budget failed, and we put a second budget up for the community to vote on. And in between that process in the budget, we lost some of our programs. So one of our goals this year was to find ways to restore some of those programs that were lost, to make sure that our students had all the opportunities that they had the previous year. And we were able to restore much of that. Unfortunately, not all of it, but much of that. Which was definitely a step in the right direction. In addition to that, as we look to restore some things, we're always looking to enhance program. We'll speak tonight about some of those program enhancements that we've had and some of those additions to the budget. Different academic supports that we look to add, mental health supports that we look to add, technology infrastructure too. That was one of the pieces that we unfortunately had to slow down last year with the budget going down. We pulled out some of the infrastructure projects that we had planned. So we did put some of those projects back into the budget for this year. Then ongoing is really updating our facilities. That is something that we always struggle with. Just like everyone that has projects on their homes, we have 5 large buildings to maintain, and unfortunately, over time, making some difficult decisions about funding some of those projects. We are currently working on a bigger project with our facilities committee that's taking a look at a number of different projects across the district. This budget includes small portions of that, but there's no way to fully fund all of those things through a budget. So I'll speak to some of the different ways we can do that. We did include in this budget, and we'll be on this up for vote in in the middle of May is a capital reserve project, and I'll speak to what that is and how we're looking to accomplish that as well as expand some of our security across the district. That was something that we did cut back on a little bit this year and want to restore that to the levels that we had previously had. Positive budget news, definitely some positives in here for us this year. First and foremost, we saw an increase in the amount of aid that we're getting from New York State. There's the largest portion of the aid this year, current year, we get about $18 million in aid from New York State. The largest portion of that is something called foundation aid. Foundation aid is really kind of unrestricted aid that we can use to fund our programs. We saw an increase in the amount of foundation aid we're going to receive from the state this year, which is terrific. That is something that has been frozen for a number of years, the state has dedicated to fully funding that to the levels that it should be over the next 2 years, this year and the following school year. So we're seeing a nice increase of about $800,000 in that particular line, which will go a long way in offsetting some of the rising costs that we're facing. We also received some federal relief funds related to COVID over the past couple of years. We had some significant increases in expenditures related to COVID, hiring more staff and many other areas in the facilities department that we experienced. So the dollars that we're receiving from the federal government are going to help offset some of those rising expenses, and look to and then just one other thing we noted in here is just the overall improvement, the financial condition of the district. The state comptroller issues fiscal stress scores for school districts every year, and we were in an area of moderate stress going back 2 years, and received a much improved score this current year. The score that we received this current year is actually based on last year. It's based on the 2021 school year, which we saw an improvement in our financial condition, and we've continued to see that trend throughout this school year. So much improved financial condition of the district as well. This is where we currently stand with our budget. You can see here where we are with our budget numbers. Our tax cap for this year is 2.12%. That's the amount that we can raise the tax levy with needing a simple majority vote to pass. So we are currently under that, just under that by a couple $1,000s, but under that. You can see the overall budget to budget increases of about $2.2 million and the tax levy increase of $1.3 million. And the state aid is largely offsetting a portion of that budget to budget increase. And then these are some of our revenues. This is what I was referencing before in terms of just an increase in our overall state aid. I just wanted to highlight this. This is where we still have a little bit of a question mark. We based this projection for state aid on the governor's initial proposal to the state legislature in terms of what the aid is going to look like. And then a few days after the governor makes her proposal, we then receive a school aid run from New York State of what that would look like. So we based this budget on that. Then there's back and forth between the governor's office and the state legislature. And oftentimes the school aid picture changes during that time period. And that generally plays out between about the middle of February and April 1st. We, with some intention, scheduled these last two budget forums after April 1st and before the budget's adopted. The reason why we do that is April 1st is the date that New York State adopts their budget. Unfortunately, after many, many years of on-time budgets, the budget was not fully adopted as of Friday, April 1st. They're still under negotiations with that. They've indicated that they're going to do kind of an extension for a week as they continue to negotiate. So we don't anticipate having a final number from New York State at this point in time. However, for everything we're hearing, the current budget discussions are for the most part excluding schools. Schools receive some nice, as I highlighted, some foundation increases. So we hear that there are several other issues that are holding up the New York State budget right now, unrelated to school districts. So we anticipate it being pretty close to what the governor had proposed and pretty comfortable with the projections here. And then in terms of items that we are looking to return to our budget, some of the program, unfortunately, we lost last year. One is an enhancement of our security. Two is some enhancements to our co-taught model at the secondary level, the middle school in particular, providing some more supports for students during their core academic class periods. There was a lab period that was unsupported, so we're going to have some special education support there. Some additional mental health support in the budget. An additional social worker is being proposed as part of this budget. That was a position that unfortunately we lost last year during some of the budget reductions we made. We lost a half a position of a social worker. We're recommending a restoration of that position to a full-time position. We've undoubtedly seen some increased needs in terms of the mental health areas and are looking to support an additional position there. In addition, a partnership with Northwell Health. When we get to Mr. Moran's portion of the presentation, he'll speak to that as well. One of the areas that unfortunately we had to cut back on this year too was our middle school athletic teams. We have traditionally for the past number of years had both a 7th and 8th grade team in many areas, and during that transition from the failed budget in May to the successful budget in June, we scaled back on those teams. So we're recommending that those be replaced. All the data that we saw from increased participation in those areas, a good number of students trying out, that we certainly would like to bring those back. In addition, we had reduced a number of administrative positions at our budget forum a couple of weeks ago. We went through those in detail, but we are over the past year down 3 administrative positions, over the past 2 years 4 administrative positions. So we're recommending restoring one of those, and that's to support the elementary curriculum and instruction. We had 2 supervisors in those areas, one for STEM and one for humanities, and we're recommending that one of those positions be restored as well. And then some of the technology infrastructure projects that I mentioned before. We have a number of projects that we would like to complete, primarily in the area of the smart boards in the classrooms. We have a number of aging smart boards there that we would like to replace as well, and workstations for teachers in those areas that need to be updated as we update those panels in the classrooms. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ferris and Mr. Moran. They'll speak to some of the new course offerings and some of the academic supports that are contained in this budget as well.
Thank you, Mr. McNamara. So with all budgets, we want to maintain the programs that we have for our students, but we also want to try to enhance and create programs that students will enjoy. And our teachers participate in that process by proposing new courses for students based on the interests of the students. So we're really happy to include in this year's budget some programming that supports students based on their interests. There has been some interest in a dance program at the high school for quite a number of years now, and we are going to be adding a choreography and dance program. We're also enhancing our art program to add some 3D art and design for the advanced placement level course for students. A course called Introduction to Podcasting, which is going to teach kids to do journalism and sports reporting and other kind of venues for using podcasting as a feature to kind of share their understanding of information. And an increase and improvement in our Project Lead the Way program. Every year for the last couple of years, we've been adding a college-level course for Project Lead the Way, which is an engineering program. So the Project Lead the Way civil engineering course will be offered to high school students for college-level credit, and we're really happy about that program, and it's been growing each year for the last 2 or 3 years now. We also have redesigned our business program. The principal of the high school had put a proposal together to create a business suite down here in the lower level and kind of bring all the business classes together in one area. And we wanted to redesign our program, so we have a freshman introductory courses of foundations in business and business communications, which then branch off into other opportunities for students like entrepreneurship and international business and other courses, accounting and other fields within that. And so students can graduate with a business sequence in many different ways as they go through. So we're really happy with the enhancements that continue to take place at the high school, constantly trying to create programming for students based on the interests of the students and future potential career fields for them, as well as give more opportunities for students at the high school level to get college credits, and that saves families money later when they go to college and they already have credit under their belt when they go to college. Another area we really wanted to continue to support was reading at the elementary level. We've created a program in the K-1-2 where basically students are doing foundations for phonemic awareness across the district, and we also have a push-in period for every K-1 and 2 classroom where a reading teacher pushes into the classroom to provide support for students. It's called the WIN period, What I Need. And with the 2 teachers in the room during that period, every student kind of gets grouped based on their needs, and the teachers provide either support for kids who are struggling or even enrichment for students who want to take their learning to another level. And that period has been very successful. We've seen a lot of great results in our programming and our outcomes for kids in terms of progress monitoring for students. And we want to continue that and help that program grow. We also felt that there was some need in the middle school for additional math AIS support and reading AIS support in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, so that we have different tiers of support for our students. So we have tier 1, which is basically all students get the basic instruction in the classroom. Tier 2 is a push-in model where a reading teacher or a math specialist pushes into the classroom and provides supports for certain kids who may need a little extra help. And then tier 3 would be the additional class in addition to the math class or the reading class. And so those 3 levels are really important to have in place in any school. So we wanted to make sure the middle school had that full model in place. So that's where those enhancements are coming as well. In addition, at the middle school, we're adding some support for the ICT program, which is the integrated co-teaching model, which I'm going to introduce Mr. Moran, who's going to explain that as well.
Thank you, Dr. Ferris. You know, as Mr. McNamara had said, you know, there was with the block scheduling at the middle school, there was a period of time where students that were designated for the ICT program, the integrated co-teaching model, there was a block of time where they didn't get that support. So the one thing that we really kind of were talking with the building administration to kind of give those kids that support during the time that they needed. You know, we also talked about, you know, adding we want to add a social worker, which will allow to support support the students district-wide. They would help out in the middle school and at the elementary school. And then we're continuing to talk about the Northwell Behavioral Health Partnership. We created this slide to kind of go over some more details of that, because I know there have been some questions. You know, it's really there. It's designed to support the students that are needing significant mental health support. A lot of these things have, you know, to do with various educational disabilities, but, you know, could also be, you know, it's there to support the staff, to kind of educate them on picking up signs. You know, there's a lot of, we've come across a number of students that may be experience suicidal ideations. You know, they might be suffering from eating disorders, and really what this program allows us to do, it allows to give resources to parents to make connections with somebody. You know, it says, what does the partnership include? You know, the concierge-like service. What they try to do is, you know, evaluate, meet with the families and the student with consent of the parents to kind of give them direction on which way they go. And the idea of is it to get them support a lot quicker than going through a pediatrician or trying to find an agency on their own. This is really for anybody that really is struggling with their mental health needs. Some things that they're also providing is community education workshops, which allow, teach parents or families how to manage anxiety. You know, these are some examples: managing anxiety in an anxious world, mental health impact on COVID for children's. These are just some of the previous or the ongoing supports that other districts have now. Healthy eating, healthy sleeping, you know, trying to support those families that way. And some of the professional development that they provide for the staff, you know, being able to identify students that might have substance abuse problems, you know, assisting in student first in stress. You know, I think the class was called stress first aid, really kind of helping the teachers understanding stress and the students understanding stress and how to manage it. They can get into the classrooms to kind of support the teachers, not in the classrooms, but into the building to support teachers on how to help with, you know, oppositional defiance in the classroom management. And the biggest thing is really just to support those students that need that extra push, that need that extra help that sometimes we're unable to provide, that we do get phone calls on. I think Mr. McNamara, you're up next.
Thank you. Yeah, so these are just some of the different facilities projects that will be taking place. That's We're having a larger conversation across the district right now about some of the projects that need to take place. We've had a facilities committee that's been meeting. They're going to be meeting with the Board of Education at the end of this month. We've identified a large amount of projects that need to be done. So we're looking at various funding for those projects. These are just smaller projects that we're going to be, things we continue to do throughout the budget process that we could fund. One project we're excited about is the art room renovation at Wantagh Middle School. We have 2 art rooms that will be renovated. We were fortunate to receive a grant from New York State to complete that work. We received about $180,000 to renovate those 2 rooms. So that project will be done over the summer. The district is picking up the balance of that project, which is about $20,000. And then on here, the business suite that Dr. Ferris referenced as well, update that. Also, some of our art rooms at the high school, we're going to be updating this summer for our ceramics classes. Our art classes have been really expanding in terms of interest level at the high school. We've seen tremendous growth in that area, which has been great. Our art department has really done a nice job of coming up with creative offerings and high-level offerings for our students, and the kids have been flocking to them. So we've expanded program there. So we're going to be doing some work on one of those rooms to get ready for the fall as well. And then some painting over Forest Lake in the cafeteria, some additional card readers. Those are part of our security protocol for folks to badge in. We have some sidewalk replacements, some fence replacements, some door replacement over at Mandalay as well. These are what our art rooms look like, and hopefully won't look like this anymore. They'll be renovated this summer. You can see they're tired, they're dated. It's original cabinetry, and we look forward to those finally being updated this summer. So that will be a much needed improvement. And then the last part of facilities projects that I'll speak to tonight is we want to renovate a portion of our main gym here at Wantagh High School, the ceiling and the windows in there. So one of the reserves that we created in our district a few years ago was a capital reserve fund. And what that is if there are any efficiencies in the budget at the end of the year and there's any fund balance, we can take a portion of that, put it into that reserve. When it reaches a level that's large enough to do a significant project like this, then we go out to the voters and we ask them to approve that project. The money's already set aside for the project, so we're not asking you for additional dollars. The money is there to fund the project. We're just asking for the voters to approve doing the work. So that's what this is. This is the proposition that'll be on the ballot on May 17th, and it's to redo the ceiling in the gymnasium. You can see how lovely our ceiling looks in the gym, and this would be taking down that existing ceiling in its entirety and restoring the original ceiling underneath there, which gives it some increased height and really will make it look nice. You know, there's this original steel beams under there that are really still in unbelievable shape, so they're going to be refinishing those and having just an open look to the gym ceiling. And then you can see our original block windows that are along both sides of the gymnasium. So we're going to be looking to replace those as well as part of that. And then in addition, refinishing the floors. This will be a refinishing, not a replacement of the floors, but just a refinishing of the floors. These are some of the, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Cedrone a little bit, just to talk a little bit about some of the drivers in our budget. These are things that we're up against every year, some of the challenges that we have. So he'll run through some of the challenges in this year's budget cycle in particular.
Thank you, Mr. McNamara. As he just stated, these are some of the items that a school district budget is up against year after year. If you've ever paid attention to a budget or been to one of these meetings in the past, a lot of the descriptions of the expenses will look familiar to you. Most of all the other things that you hear about that go on here every day, people deliver to students. It's a people-heavy business. So salary increases, benefit costs, as one might expect, are always larger drivers in the budget. This year is certainly no exception. Benefits and healthcare, you see, is up almost $1 million. That's almost exclusively all healthcare, which had a 12% increase this year. I'm assuming most of that they're passing along, obviously, what's happened in the last year and a half to 2 years. Healthcare agencies, hospitals are passing along all of their increased costs that they've been dealing with in their environment for the last year and a half to 2 years. Negotiated salary increases. That number also includes the staff members that we discussed that are being added back. So that's in there as well. If you take those out, that number is probably about $800,000 or $900,000. That includes social worker, splitting the athletic teams and the additional coaches that come with that, and some of the other positions that we had discussed adding back. Special ed is another area that's a large chunk of our budget. In total, special ed is just shy of about $10 million. There are typically student placement and other student IEP required services for which those costs increase year over year. And then the last two are the same thing that everybody in this room is experiencing out in the outside world, which is inflationary costs, whether it be at the gas pump, groceries, anything like that. We're not immune to that, so we have $300,000 in increased energy costs. We're experiencing that now, so we are increasing our budget to pay those bills for next year. And the almost $100,000 is also inflationary, and that's almost exclusively, again, in the facilities area, from things like plastic bags and toilet paper to, not exciting stuff, but collectively, when you add it up, we have experienced 20–25% increases on a lot of the things that we buy and use on a regular basis. Those are the positive, or I should say, increases in the budget. They wouldn't be positive depending on your spin on it, but they add to $2.7 million. So we highlight those because those are common drivers. But the budget increase is $2.2 million. So that $500,000 difference between the two means there are other codes in the budget that are going down. Right? This is a summation of the total. So as you go through the details, you'll see some are up, some are down. We just want to highlight the ones that are the most common and the ones that have the largest increases year over year. The budget is, all school budgets in New York are funded primarily from two sources, state aid and property taxes. So state aid, as Mr. McNamara was alluding to earlier, is a big chunk of our budget. It's about, do we have it on here? I think it was about 24% of the budget. It's that $19,250,000 that we've currently estimated. Then the balance of the budget is paid for through property taxes. And like I said, that's throughout New York State. Those are our two biggest revenue sources. As was also mentioned earlier, the $19,250 is based on what the governor had put out in January. The process typically goes, the governor puts out a budget in January, the legislature reviews it, they go through a process where the Senate puts their version of a budget together, the Assembly does as well, and everybody kind of gets together and kind of hashes out all the differences. The New York State budget, the New York State fiscal year started on Friday, April 1st. So they like to be done by that date. The last decade or so, they have been done by April 1st, which is why at a meeting like this, we would have been a little more solid on the numbers, although I think the $19,250 is a good number. There have been years when it's May, June, July, August, and they're still doing budget up in Albany. That's a little more difficult for us when our fiscal year has started and we don't yet know what our state aid is, particularly when it represents a quarter of the funding for us. The increase in the foundation aid of almost $800,000 or $900,000 does offset, a large chunk of the increases that we've experienced. So in that sense, that's good news. As I had also mentioned, it's a people business, so 75% of what we do, and of that budget, $64 million worth out of the $84 million is for people. It's salaries, benefits, and all of those related costs. There's really no way around that in a school district. Again, the budget codes that you see in the handout are standardized across the state. You could go to any school district in New York State and find the same codes. They're going to mean relatively the same things. And if you were to go through theirs, you're going to add their numbers up, and you're going to hit somewhere in that 70 to 75% range of people and benefits. Again, it's a people business. That's where the majority of the money goes. I will turn it back to you.
And then just one other program I'd like to highlight tonight too is we had a first-year initiative this year for Universal Pre-K, which we were really excited to start. UPK is a program that New York State and the federal government have started to put dollars behind. And we received for the first time ever last year a grant to provide UPK services to 4-year-olds in our community. We received enough funding for 64 spots. So we started a class at each one of our elementary schools this year. Unfortunately, it's done through a lottery system. So we had about 130 people in the community apply for that, and 64 were fortunate enough to receive spots in our UPK program. We are anticipating receiving the same number of spots for next year and continue to plan to run that program. We did a lottery in January and have assigned those spots for the upcoming year. So hopefully there's some more dollars behind that come in the future from New York State. I believe that's part of what's the discussion that's taking place right now in Albany about potentially expanding some UPK dollars as well. So we'll continue to watch that. One of the challenges that some districts are receiving, we were fortunate that we had space for the 3 classes. Not every district that received dollars has a space to accommodate the class. We've partnered with Scope to provide those services. You get a fixed dollar amount per child, and you're only reimbursed if you have that number of children in your program. One of the real nice benefits of Scope providing that service is they can provide the service for that dollar amount. At our contracted employees' rates, it would be challenging for us to do that. So we've had a nice partnership with Scope over the years for before and after school care, so it was really a nice natural fit for us to use them as a provider. And they've really done a nice job providing some support in that program. So we look forward to continuing that and offering that as an additional service to the community for next year as well. So just to summarize, this budget is really able to maintain all the existing programs this year and to enhance some of the programs that we highlighted. We feel that we're able to restore, a number of the areas that were lost and keep the budget below the tax cap. As I said, as the budget currently stands, we're a few $1,000s below that tax cap. The overall budget-to-budget increase is about 2.69%, and the difference there being offset by some of our additional state aid that we're receiving as well. Our next forum will be on Wednesday, 10 o'clock in the public library, and then the Board of Education will formally adopt our budget on Thursday evening at the next Board of Education meeting. I'd also just like to thank, I know a number of people in this room participated in our focus groups as well. We did 4 of those focus groups last week. Always nice to have just a conversation about the budget, just in a more informal basis, just to hear people's concerns and take those into account as well as we develop the budget. So I want to thank everyone that did participate in those, as we had a number of community members that did. This is when the budget vote will take place. It's on May 17th. It'll be at each one of our elementary schools, as it traditionally is. It will be in our main gyms at Mandalay and at Forest Lake, and in our auxiliary gym at Wantagh Elementary School. And it'll be open from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. So we certainly hope you come out and vote. And if you're not registered, I'm guessing that many folks like you that are engaged in the process are probably already registered to vote. But if you're not, these are the dates where you can register to vote. It'll be on Tuesday, May 3rd at Wantagh High School, and Saturday, May 7th in our district offices. And if you have any questions about that registration process, you can reach out to our district clerk, Elaine McGuigan, and her email address is there for you as well. This presentation, along with the other 3 presentations, will be posted to our district website. If you go to our Assistant Superintendent for Business page, all of our budget information is listed there, all of the budget detail. I'd also encourage you to take a look at, there's a budget narrative document that's available in the back of the room as well. It gives you a good sense of the budget development process and some of the challenges that we've had, some of the strengths of this year's budget, and some of the improvements that we'll be making, and just kind of gives it a good big picture perspective. And I thank Mr. Cedrone for putting that together for us. And all of those items are posted to the website. We've recorded all of these presentations as well, and they're posted to the website. So if there's something that you didn't have an opportunity to hear For example, at the last session, we went into greater detail about staffing. If you have some questions or would like to look at that detail, all that is posted to the website, as well as all the budget detail. You can find the budget and all the detail, and going through line by line, code by code, if you have any questions about any of those items. And that's it. We'll turn it over to any questions folks may have, and I'm happy to stick around afterwards if you just want to come up and ask a question more informally as well. Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. So when staff members come to propose a new course, they come and propose that along with all the expenditures related to it. So if we need specific equipment, whatever it may be. So the board is looking at that whole picture. In addition, when we look to add a new course, often it's a replacement for an existing course. We have some courses that are under-enrolled, and student interest drives that, right? We see what students are interested in, what they're looking at. And sometimes we see, particularly, for example, in our business department, we've reworked some of those courses. We saw some of our numbers dropping, some decreased interest in some of those courses. So they took a lot of time, really examined that, and tried to provide some high interest courses. And as a result, we've actually seen a bump in enrollment in the courses for next year in that area. But they're replacements. So it's not necessarily an add in terms of staffing for us in FTE, because that's replaced an existing course. So we try to do that. In addition, I'll tell you, our art department has done a really good job of this in terms of expanding. They'll do some courses that run alternate year, right? So if we've created some opportunities where they'll run every other year too. And what that allows students to take the full breadth of the whole program, but we can kind of slow down how we're offering that so we don't need additional staffing. So looking for creative ways like that too to add program without seeing a rise in staffing. Our high school staffing, those courses that Dr. Ferris highlighted earlier, our high school staffing is really basically flat for next year, and that's with adding all of that additional programming. And we also look for efficiencies where there's, maybe if we know we're going to be down a little bit because it's enrollment driven in a core area class, well, now that's a great opportunity to add an elective or add something there. So we definitely try to look for those efficiencies where we can, so that it's not a continued add to our budget each and every year. Yeah, certainly. So I certainly hear that concern. We went to extreme measures to really make sure during that COVID year, to open back up again in 2020, that we brought elementary class sizes down, and that came with increased staffing. Right? In order to have students in K-5 in every day, really K-6 every day, the way that we did it to start the year, the big piece that allowed us to do that was to add some staffing there, and it brought class sizes down significantly. We had class sizes that ranged between 14 and 17 during that year. That's just not sustainable for us financially. If you think of every time we had a class section in an elementary school, if it's a new hire for that position, the total impact to our budget is roughly about $100,000 when you look at a starting salary for a teacher, plus benefits and everything that comes along with that. So that adds up quickly. One of the things that, I shared this with some of the folks in the focus group, and I don't have this slide to pull up. I wish I did. And I'm happy to, if you leave me your information, I'm happy to send it to you. What our overall class sizes look like in terms of projections next year. There's a couple of grade levels that are pushing up against our cap, just to give you a sense of what those numbers are. In kindergarten, our class size max is 24. In grades 1 through 3, our class size max is 25. And in grades 4 through 6, it's 27. So we have a couple of sections that are pushing close to that, but the vast majority are not. It really depends, a big piece of it depends on how those sections break. Just think about it in terms of, do the simplest math. Over at Mandalay, we typically run either 2 or 3 sections in each grade level. If you have 24 kids in a grade level, it's easy math, 1 section, 24 kids. When you have 36, well, now it breaks into 2 sections of 18. So we have many grades like that are running in 20, 21, 22. We have other grades that are pushing closer to the max, 24, 25. They're fewer and far between, but it just really depends on where that natural break is. What we do then is we watch that number. So sometimes it changes, right? We're picking a point in time to create the budget. We watch that number throughout the summer, all the way up until August 15th. And I'll keep the Board of Education updated, sending home class updates, and we'll have some movement. We'll have a new student that moves in, we'll have a student that moves out, and we watch that. Some are right on the cusp. And then by August 15th, we make that decision if a section is going to break or not. So I hear the concern. We watch that closely. And yes, all those things were factored in terms of developing the budget for this year. Sure. Yep. So they are the only game in town right now. To be perfectly honest with you, this is they are providing that level of support for probably over 30 districts right now in Nassau County. They have such a large continuum of services that they can provide. There's not many other folks with that level of resources that are offering partnerships like this. That was the program that we looked at because of what they could provide for us. Yep, it's just shy of $100,000. It's about probably, when you factor in all the coaches' salaries, busing, officials, all those things, it's probably right around $95,000 thereabouts. So there's a small amount left. We had a couple of different sources of that, right? So there was the initial funding, the CARES Act money that was about $2.4 million. That in large part was used as reimbursement for expenses that we had. The staffing that I highlighted earlier, the additional staffing at the elementary schools, additional support that way. That was the biggest bulk of dollars that we got. One of the things that I think I shared at the last forum was the additional funding that came out afterwards was tied to something called Title I funding. That's funding that we get from the federal government for based on your poverty rate within your district. A couple of years ago, unfortunately, we lost our Title I funding because we fell below the threshold for the poverty rate. It's 2%, and we fell to like 1.9%. It wasn't a huge amount of dollars for us. It was about $60,000. Certainly a nice to have grant that we received. Much smaller compared when you look at what some other districts across New York State get. They get a much larger amount of money. The reason why I bring that up is the second round of funding that we received, that many schools received in much larger amounts, was tied to that number. It was based on your Title I funding. When we initially, that grant was initially announced, we received $0 in that line because of that. We advocated to New York State, the Education Department. We advocated with our local legislatures, and they came back and were able to secure us a small portion of that funding, about $700,000. That's a part of that is what's still remaining. So we use that money to run our summer program that we ran this summer. We use that to pay for some of our additional reading and math support before and after school. That's where we use those dollars, and we have some additional funding left to hopefully be able to run something similar in nature for next year, and then the funds will be exhausted at that point. Yep. Rich? Yep. 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 So that's a great question. So we get a first look at what our aid is going to look like in the middle of February, and that's, as you're saying, that's based on the governor's proposal. That included about $800,000 in increased dollars. What the legislators are talking about right now, back and forth with the governor to adopt the budget, is all of those numbers, right? They're negotiating that. We have, at least I can't think of an example in recent memory of a time where that number that we've seen in February has come in lower than what we actually received. There's a couple of times where we were close, right? We were sweating it out 2 years ago because of the state ran out of money. You know, they had no money before the federal funding came in, and we didn't know what that was going to look like. Luckily, the numbers came through. There was, you know, going back even beyond that, 2008-9 was another time period where that was something was similar. All the projections right now that we see from New York State going out 5 years are really solid. So we're very comfortable with the 800,000. If anything, you may see a little bit of an uptick. Where I think we may see a couple more dollars is potentially in UPK, if that's negotiated for a few more bucks. So we may get a little bit more of a grant there. But we're pretty comfortable with that number. Yep. Yeah, so that was the exact situation we were anticipating a couple of years ago when COVID first hit. We were very worried about that. So then if that were to happen and the funding were to fall apart, then we're going to have to make some difficult decisions about program cuts, right? So you know, I don't anticipate us being in that situation this year. I don't want to cause any undue alarm. I think we'll actually be in hopefully a little bit of a better situation. But I don't anticipate that happening. Yeah, so really just a difference in title. That's Mr. Moran, right? So we had a director of PPS, and it is a very difficult position to fill. It is a big job, and it's a challenging job, and we wanted to attract the best candidates that we could. So last year, when our current director of PPS resigned to take a position elsewhere, we posted it with an elevated title. Wasn't an increase in FTEs, wasn't an increase in administrative staff. It was a title change. All of that, yeah, all of those positions would be funded out of but well, look, it's all coming out of that $82 million bucket, right? In terms of our salaries. Yep. Sure. Yeah, so right now this budget has everything in there, right? So there's no intent to cut either one of those things or any of those spots. We have the additional dollars that you see in there for athletics is to bring back the second teams, plus some additional expenses in those codes. And the additional administrative dollars is the additional elementary supervisor position for that. And the budget that is being proposed to the community right now, as of this moment, hasn't been adopted by the board yet, but has all of those things contained in it. I couldn't answer that. That would be a question that would involve board discussion and board input. I couldn't answer that for you exactly what that would be. Yep. So we're kind of set up fairly traditionally, not how they ran this year, but in years prior, and that's at a pretty good level. There's still, unfortunately, in certain sports there's cuts, but that allows us to really house a good number of students that are interested in the program. This year, yeah. So our athletic director tracks all that. So like for example, this year she gave me regular updates on X number of students tried out for a particular team, and unfortunately this many students didn't make the team. And that's how we can gauge the interest levels that are there. We were able to support a good number of kids this year, obviously not everybody that wanted to participate, and hopefully we'll be able to support even more next year with the add back of the second teams. Yep. 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 So we're set up to run in this budget a 7th grade team, an 8th grade team, a JV. Yep, a JV team and a varsity team. That's all included in this year's budget, and we had a good amount of interest even this current year. Unfortunately, with just the one team, and unfortunately not going to be able to keep everybody. But next year, a 7th and an 8th grade team will be there. That's being proposed in this budget. Yep. Yeah, so I think you're doing that right now, right? So by advocating for teams, right? So, yeah, I got you. Yeah, so that look, we have look. I feel like I have a pretty good sense of that, right? So in terms of some of those programs, we had to make some real difficult decisions last year. It was not fun to make any of those decisions. All of our programs have great value for our kids and different areas for different kids, right? So none of those decisions were fun. We didn't relish any of it, but that's one of the reasons why you're seeing this being proposed to be added back as quickly as it is. Sometimes when districts go through a failed budget and have to come in with a second budget vote, we had discussed that last year, and put up kind of a list to the community and said, look, if the budget doesn't pass, we had to make some difficult cuts between budget 1 and budget 2 last year. The budget didn't pass. Now, after budget 2, there were going to be even more extensive cuts, right? It was going to be well over another $1 million worth of cuts. So that would have been even more painful. So unfortunately, we didn't get there. But that's the process, right? So hopefully this budget contains all those things being added back. And with a successful budget vote on May 17th, we'll have those programs for everybody in September. Any other questions? I'm happy to stick around for a while afterwards. If you have any other questions, just want to come up and share an opinion about something, I'm happy to do that. Thank you all for taking a few minutes with us tonight, and for all those online that joined us as well, we appreciate you taking the time. Have a great night.